It's great to have all of those words, but it's also really good to have something in a visual form. So here we have the essential characteristics of cloud, without which the service cannot be truly defined as cloud. Here we have the service models that form those cloud deliveries. And here we have the deployment models, public, private, hybrid, community. There is no definitive relationship between software as a service or public cloud, which seems to be the confusion in a lot of cases. This is our cloud stack. There's another element which we have to consider when we're defining cloud services, and that's single or multi-tenancy. And the reason that we have to consider that is that it fits in all levels. So here in our very simple diagram, we have a multi-tenant infrastructure, a single multi-tenant infrastructure at the bottom. We have 3 platforms which are both single and multi-tenant sitting on that infrastructure. And upon those platforms, we have single and multi-tenant software services. So we have to take this dimension into account as well. So we're looking at service models, looking at deployment models, we're looking at single and multi-tenancy. So we have 3 dimensions in which to work. And when we represent that graphically, we have our 3-dimensional model. And this shows us that there are actually 24 different types of deployment which we should consider. Now, if you think back to those early statements, we want to use the cloud. Okay, which one of the 24 options would you like to have? It's actually really easy to whittle these down, and all it takes is a few simple questions, those questions that we have to ask to understand what the requirements are. We can find out that it's actually software as a service that they need. We can find out that their requirements have identified a community cloud would be best for their organization. And we know through further inquiry that a single tenant solution is what's required. So with a few simple but definitive questions, we can understand what that model needs to be. So let's look at a couple of examples. Here we have some technology in play. We have a nice SAN infrastructure. We have some servers with Hyper-V for virtualization. We have some management with Active Directory and the System Center suite. And we have some edge and proxy services. This is private cloud infrastructure dedicated to one organization. If we have a look at a public cloud infrastructure supporting many organizations, we can see that from a technology standpoint, it's pretty much exactly the same underneath. It's simply how those services are deployed and how those services are delivered which supports those definitions. There is a whole lot of confusion in the market space. Here are some myths. Gartner compiled a list of cloud myths. Myth number 1, cloud computing is an architecture or an infrastructure. Well, hopefully we've just established that cloud computing is actually a definition of service types. Myth number 2, every vendor will have a different cloud. They can't have a different cloud because cloud is a definition of service types. They may have a different flavor of infrastructure, there may be different badges on the boxes, but cloud is a definition of service. It's not a definition of vendor. Myth number 3, SaaS is the cloud. Again, SaaS is not the cloud, SaaS is a service model that's part of cloud. Myth number 4, cloud computing is a brand new revolution. No, cloud computing has been around for a long time. It simply wasn't called cloud computing. The evolution has been over the course of years, and we've now reached a point where the definitions have become important. Myth number 5, all remote computing is cloud computing. This is one which is commonly heard. To dispel that myth, if I create a server and I deploy that in a data center to be remotely accessed by a customer, that's not cloud computing. They simply have a dedicated server in a data center. So remote computing is not cloud computing, it's simply remote. Myth number 6, the internet and the web are the cloud. This is, for me, the most irritating because the internet and the web are both different things anyway. So how they can both be the cloud is beyond me. but the cloud has a specific definition. The internet is a transport mechanism, and the web is a set of protocols for delivering hypertext. Myth number 7, everything will be in the cloud. Maybe one day in the future, we will not have a definition of local storage, but that day is a long way away. In our lifetimes, everything will not be in the cloud. And myth number 8, the cloud eliminates private networks. If anything, private networks will become more important as we identify those data elements, those assets, which need to be held locally, which can't be put either in private or public clouds, and which must be maintained behind secure networks. And at the same time, we're accessing these online services, these cloud services. So we need to have the intrusion detection, the intrusion prevention, the firewalling systems in place in order to protect ourselves, our networks, and our data. But even more important is the cloud confusion which comes from our industry. Here we have a quote from a meeting I had with a senior manager at a service provider in the UK. Cloud is just VPS or shared hosting by another name. This is upsetting and sad. This is inside the industry simply not understanding what cloud actually means. Here you have another quote from a comment on a cloud adoption news item online, which said cloud is for people wanting to save a few pennies. Cloud is simply cheap. Again, this is saddening because it puts the wrong message out to the market. Cloud is not a cheap solution. If anything, the adoption of a cloud infrastructure or a cloud system will carry an initial cost load as the services are run in parallel with on-site and as that migration has to take place. So no, cloud is not for people wanting to save a few pennies. We need to get these definitions right, and we need to be consistent in our use of definitions. It's very easy to drop cloud into a conversation, especially when we're talking in general terms, but the definitions have to be correct. If those definitions aren't correct, all that comes is confusion. So we have to be consistent in our use of these definitions. There's a quote from Michael Parker at CA Technologies. He said, "Some engagements are designed with a heavy technical focus, but we often discover that once the project is underway, the client has not reached the level of operational maturity, e.g. update policies, procedures, documentation, etc. Without an alignment of people, processes, and technology, we find many clients will not meet their stated goal." This is not about technology. This is far larger than simply providing new technologies, than providing shiny solutions. This is about looking at a whole organization and how they work, and ensuring that the adoption of the new service spreads throughout that organization, that all of the processes are reviewed in order to promote adoption, that the people within that organization are aware of what that adoption means. It's far bigger than just being technology. So we need to make sure that the decision is strategic in its implementation as well as its direction. We need to make sure that those decisions are made for the right reasons and with the right view. This cannot be a short-term cost-save solution. This is a long-term strategic decision for any organization, especially a public sector organization. So, when we talk about private cloud, it must cover all of the aspects in order to be valid and viable. We need to look at the single tenancy, the multi-tenancy, the combination of services which may be required, infrastructure, platform, software. And we need to remember that we're building these long-term solutions, not just short-term answers. What? What are you laughing at? I can't do it if you're laughing. It's so unprofessional. You've been singing away. On your toes. Too soon! Now in presentation mode. Alright, shut up.